Tuesday edition. It is cut down day around the National Football
Today's
League.
episode of Orange and Blue Today is...
Wrong one.
Whoa.
Yeah. That means the Denver Broncos have had to cut things down. Maybe I should cut down on my caffeine so I don't play the wrong clip.
Cut down on your caffeine? Is that possible? I don't think you could survive without your caffeine.
Well, the one day I did not go with any caffeine, I ended up getting a migraine. So it's caffeine for me.
What that tells me is maybe you need to gradually cut your caffeine, perhaps.
Mix in a little water.
Yeah.
A little water, a little ice.
Maybe.
Good to go.
Do you have caffeine after 6 p.m.?
No.
Okay, that's good.
After this show, I don't have any caffeine.
That's good. Okay. So you're caffeine-free Cecil when we record a show in the evening, then. That's what you're telling me. Okay.
I might have other substances, but no caffeine.
Easy.
It's a family show.
Remember who you work for.
Yeah, exactly. We love it. It's a rough day, though, Mase. You know what I mean? I brought it up on air. I'll bring it up to you because we can have this conversation. But we had a tracker of guys that were getting fired today. I understand it's what we do. It's what everyone does basically, but it's still a tough day around the league. How many players lose their jobs? 1,100, something like that?
Well, it's what? But if you combine the last couple of days, because some were made official on Monday, the Broncos made 7 of them official Monday. So over the 2 days, you've got it, and you have injured reserve designations as well. So, you've got roughly 35 per team that are losing their jobs. So 35 times 32, right? So you got 30, 32 times, just do the math right there. It's north of 1,000, 1,000 guys losing their jobs. Now, that being said, 16 times 32 are going to get jobs back on the practice squad, right? So it's, you're going to take 496 of them, and they're going to be back on practice squad. So there's good news for some of them still being in the mix, and so it's not altogether bad. But today is rough, and that practice when you're out there today, I've talked about this, I'm sure, a bunch of times. But when you go from seeing 90 guys out there to seeing only 53 out there, it looks pretty empty. Basically, for this practice today, you can't have a traditional practice because you don't have enough players to have a scout team out there. You've got to go, you can go ones versus ones, and you can still get some work done. Sean Payton talked about how they did some red zone work today, but you can't, this is not a practice where you're going to be able to do much in terms of game prep as you're starting to look ahead to the Tennessee Titans, because you literally do not have enough players for a scout team, because today you only had 9 offensive linemen out there. The 9 offensive linemen that are on your 53, and of course that means you're 1 offensive lineman short for having a scout team, because you need to have at least 10 for a traditional practice that you'd have. So start there, and then you can kind of do the math on the rest of the roster.
Yeah, do the math on the rest of the roster, and I believe our buddy Chris Thomason, who is the best, by the way, he had tweeted out hey, couldn't report this until after practice, but Sam Ehlinger was that final cut that people were waiting for. So Ehlinger was out there and then got cut, or at least you announced it, right? Is that correct?
He was that was the one that we did not know going on in the practice field.
Right.
So then we took attendance and counted 53, and then that was the one guy. It was pretty easy because the quarterbacks wear different color jerseys, because you have one side wearing orange and then one side wearing white, and then the quarterbacks wear blue, and you only saw 2 blue jerseys. So it was pretty quick, pretty clear, pretty quick which player was the one that was the last roster move for which we had not accounted to that point.
Okay. So, are you okay with the 2 quarterback thing? Because for me, it's all right. Your roster is too talented. The defensive line we're going to get into, and how many defensive linemen they kept, but I'm perfectly fine with 2. This is different for me, Mase, in terms of Zach Wilson was an interesting developmental guy. You didn't get anything for him, but still interesting prospect. Ellinger, we've seen start in the regular season, and I know he had a good preseason and wish him well, and maybe he's back on the practice squad or whatever, but I'm fine with 2 quarterbacks on the 53.
Well, I mean, if you can pass it, he doesn't have to pass through because he's not on waivers, but if nobody kind of makes a move on him and you can get him in the practice squad tomorrow, now that just becomes a matter of kind of the sales pitch, right? Is the Broncos sales pitch enough to have him on the 53 or on the practice squad? I'm sorry, pardon me. Is the Broncos sales pitch enough to have him on the practice squad, or does somebody else have a better sales pitch? Or maybe does someone else say, hey, we want you on our 53? That's what it comes down to, basically, right? Like, do the Broncos give him the best deal, or does somebody else give him the best deal? That's what this is going to be. I think if he's a Bronco on their practice squad tomorrow, all is well. And if not, then you've got to go to a contingency plan. So we'll know by this time tomorrow whether it worked out or not.
Yeah, we'll know by this time tomorrow. And in the meantime, everybody waits. I guess we could start with what happened yesterday, even though it's old news, and the Audric Estime thing. Again, not really much on this. And on these roster cut downs surprised me, Mase. Did you feel any differently? We can start with Estime. We can start with any of the players that were cut today. It just seemed like, all right, they made their decisions on the wide receivers. They made their decisions on the running backs. And my God, they made the decision on the defensive line. It was collect them all.
I mean, I think interesting move. The one that was a mild surprise was Sam Franklin Jr. being released.
You had talked about that before.
Yeah, that was one. They basically, it was Devin Key getting the nod over Sam Franklin Jr. at safety. That was sort of maybe a mild surprise. I mean, Key was on the team last year. Sam Franklin Jr. was, I mean, there was some intentionality to signing him in free agency, specifically for a special teams role. But in the end, going with Key there, I think part of it maybe getting the special teams work perhaps from some other players. Chris Abrams-Drain, J.L. Skinner contributed to that decision in the end. So maybe a mild surprise there. And I think inside linebacker, the one that I think probably was the most surprising was Corene Reed over Lavelle Bailey in the end. And maybe if Reed getting it over Jordan Turner, if you kept one of the undrafted rookies, Reed had the lead early on. I think we kind of talked about this for a while. Maybe the first couple of weeks in camp, Reed probably was the leader in terms of who was going to be the favorite to get the undrafted spot, to say, okay, who's the most likely undrafted player to stick on the 53? The first couple of weeks, it looked like Reed was the favorite. And then Jordan Turner really seemed to kind of surge past, and probably had better game film than Reed did. But in the end, Reed, he had the bigger signing bonus. So certainly then kind of a little bit of intentionality as well to the Broncos liking him from the beginning. And Reed ended up getting that spot. So maybe a little bit of a surprise that Reed did stick over Bailey, considering that you go back to the beginning of camp, there was, coaches, Sean Payton was raving about Bailey and his progress, and he was getting some first-team reps when both Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw were out. So there was an opportunity there, but in the end, Bailey not on the 53. So maybe that was a little bit of a mild surprise there, that Bailey did not get the nod and Corene Reed did when all was said and done.
Our YouTube chat room, hi YouTube, is talking about their surprise Frank Crumb made the team. Well, as our man Gage puts, the team is higher on him than some of the fans out there are.
Well, I asked Sean Payton about Frank Crumb, and he gave the nugget today that 3 teams requested him in trade talks. That 3 teams inquired about Frank Crumb in a possible trade.
Okay.
So not only are the Broncos high on him, but there are other teams high on Frank Crumb as well. So it's not just the Broncos that see something in him, see something in that athletic upside, but other teams see something as well. Mike McGlinchey, I asked McGlinchey because he talked later about Frank Crumb, and McGlinchey talked about not only the athletic measurables, but his intelligence, and even joked, hey, he's one of the few guys out there who's taller than I am, because McGlinchey, of course, checks in, was like 6'8", and Crumb's got a little bit, I think, an inch on him, basically. So that, I think, sort of says a lot, and I think this is something to think about long term in terms of the Broncos planning at offensive tackle. They're investing a lot of time and development in Frank Crumb.
Yep.
And the fact that 3 teams inquired about Frank Crumb and they've said no. So think about this. Devon Vele, Sean Payton didn't want to trade him, but then the trade offer reached a point where they couldn't refuse it, and they say yes, and now Devon Vele is a New Orleans Saint. You have 3 teams inquiring on Frank Crumb, so certainly if there's multiple teams, there's a chance to kind of play them against each other and create a market, maybe drive up the market, right?
Yep.
And they say, nope, we are hanging on to Frank Crumb. We're going to continue to develop him. They clearly see something long-term in where Frank Crumb can go. That tells me they see future starter in Frank Crumb.
Yeah.
Down the line, maybe like 2-3 years from now. This may be something where it's second contract is where we see this, like that they continue developing him. But you, at this point, unless there is a huge setback at some point, we may need to put Frank Crumb in Sharpie on this roster for at least the next 2 years. And then you imagine they may work an extension out with him to keep him around and continue the development, because they seem extremely high on him. If you've got teams, multiple teams that are calling about wanting to trade for Frank Crumb, and the Broncos are saying, nope, hands off, we want to keep him around. That I think was very telling, and is something that has some long-term implications.
Yeah, very, very telling. And correct me if I'm wrong, but as a UDFA, his contract will be up after next year, which means
he'd be an RFA. Yes, so you could him. You could do the RFA. You could have him on the RFA tender, or you could kind of rip that up and say, all right, let's sign him to a multi-year deal right then and there. Same is also true for Alex Palczewski as well. Like, and he's actually in the last year of his contract, but he comes up to RFA status this coming off season as well. So that's another thing to kind of monitor, because they've got 3 years invested in him too.
And with Crumb specifically, although Poucher works into this, I'm not sure if it's right or left. They've worked him at both. We saw a little more right this year than I expected, Mase.
Yes.
But, and it's Zach Strief. I mean, you've talked plenty one-on-one with Zach Strief. If there's one guy to trust, and you trust a lot on that staff, but, I mean, my God, Zach Strief gets a molded clay. He gets to mold this guy.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, I think of all the things that were said today in terms of long-term impact, because Sean Payton had one of his lengthy press conferences. It went 35 minutes, but he went on for a while today. I think what he said about Frank Crumb probably has the most long-term impact potentially on this team, and even how they look at next year's draft, because next year looks like a deep tackle class to where you may think, okay, the Broncos maybe take one high. If they see this sort of path for Frank Crumb, is that something that they're really looking at? Because maybe if they're turning down this sort of interest in Frank Crumb, clearly they see something in the guy.
Yeah. Something
long-term. And this doesn't sound like they see Frank Crumb potential swing back up here based on that. It's right. Something more than that.
Right. And I know it's not everything, but it's not nothing in my eyes. But every time you see Bo Nix, Frank Crumb is almost always with him.
Yeah, when they're at Nuggets games, Avs games,
Rockies.
wherever. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to look very far past Bo Nix to see those golden locks and that 6'9" frame nearby. Like he's almost his bodyguard in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to miss.
Yeah.
Frank Crumb, that's for sure.
Yeah, there were some interesting things that were said today that came out of that Sean Payton press conference. I mean, he doubled down on Jeremy Crawshaw today as well.
Okay.
You know, he's that long term they're going to be happy with him. I mean, it's funny, like you can see like there are certain guys that like they believe in Frank Crumb and they believe in Crawshaw. Like,
and isn't he right where you expected, Mace? I mean, for a rookie punter, isn't he maybe even ahead of where you would expect?
Well, I mean, you'd like to see the practice work translate to the games. Now, Sean Payton did say something they're going to change in terms of how they do practices. Now, again, and it happened today. I mean, they were working on punting, and it, as per usual, gets out there and launches bombs as ever. What Sean Payton did say today is that they're going to do some things in practice where he'll come out and punt once, and then they'll go back to the rest of practice. So in other words, it's going to simulate a game more. What they do in practice is usually they'll have a punt period where he'll have, say, 6, 8, 10 punts in a row, which is fine, but that doesn't replicate the way it is in a game. In a game, you come out there, you get one punt, and then you go back to the sideline. So what he said is they're going to have these points in practice where it replicates a game, where they'll just be going on and on and on, then stop, punt, get out there and punt once, and then go back to the rest of practice. So now I think he's going to get these things that actually replicate the one shot that you get in games rather than getting into a rhythm and just blasting it over and over again. So I thought that was actually something that was pretty interesting today.
I like that.
Yeah. Another thing interesting, this isn't so much long term, but he, talking about how long they met today or last night about the cuts, like how the meetings have gotten longer year after year. And this one was getting into like 6 hours, several hours in terms of how long they discussed the cuts that they were making, basically. Testament to the increased depth of the roster and the increased quality of the roster that they had. So, were you surprised that Caleb Lohner hit the waiver wire today?
I have a lot to say about that.
Oh boy! Oh, here we go. Because of your guy, Bill Krosky Merritt, still on Washington.
How do you get Bill from Ja'Cory? I know that that's
because his nickname was like Lil Bill. That's
Lil Bill.
Yeah, so that's where it was.
So Bill, all right, Bill Ja'Cory, Krosky Merritt.
Yeah.
There were others that are available, Brashard Smith, whatever. But yeah, I mean, he is so raw, Mace.
Yeah.
He's just so raw. I mean, we're 3 years, in my opinion, away from him being able to contribute because most tight ends come into the league and they're 2 years away.
And think about this. Sean Payton gets up there today and talks about how much they value Frank Crumb. And Frank Crumb last year, we know, was incredibly raw. I mean, almost everybody watching this program saw the preseason last year and saw how Frank Crumb looked. I mean, very raw. And if you were making the initial 53 last year, I don't think anybody had Frank Crumb among the best 53. But they kept him, right? So they are willing to have roster spots for guys who aren't among the best 53 right then and there, but they believe in their development. So that it's telling that they did not have a spot on the 53 this year for Caleb Lohner because they did last year for Frank Crumb. That there was a spot on the 53 today for Lucas Krull. Lucas Krull, to his credit, by the way, had a really good camp, and I think that there are a few guys, there are a few players that I think I want to give a shout out to today, because Lucas Kroll, they bring in Evan Engram, basically as a pass catching tight end. That guy, Evan Engram usurps Lucas Kroll, right? And Lucas Kroll comes out this summer and fights and has a very good camp and basically earns his way onto the 53. And on the defensive line, the Broncos draft Savion Jones. And that means Jordan Jackson and Iwazurike. It seems like they're probably fighting for one spot because most teams, there are 3-4. They have 6 defensive linemen. Iwazurike and Jordan Jackson both did so well that they kind of forced the Broncos to keep 7 because of how well they performed this summer. So those are, Jackson, Iwazurike, Kroll. These are 3 guys who responded to the challenge of new players coming in and fought their tails off to keep their jobs. And that's something that I think deserves recognition. You could even say the same thing at the running back position with J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey coming in for Tyler Bidet and Jaleel McLaughlin still being on this team. Those 2 fought their tails off to keep their jobs in that room. So that is something that you like to see, that when you have the challenge come in from new players, that that you have players that respond and say, if you're going to come in and take my job, you are not taking, if you take this job, I am not going to make it easy on you. Or I'm in Lucas Kroll. I mean, he certainly has a less prominent role this year than last year because Evan Engram is here, but he kind of forced his way to stick on the 53, and that deserves a lot of credit.
And he's your Engram backup.
Yes, and Engram missed 8 games last year. So now Engram doesn't have a lengthy injury history in the last 5 years, so there's every reason to believe that Engram can hold up over the course of the season. He doesn't have the injury history over the years of, say like Dre Greenlaw. It's not as or J.K. Dobbins certainly. So there's every reason to believe that Engram should hold up over the course of the season. But if Engram does miss some time, you may need Lucas Kroll because he's the only other person in the tight end room that can come close to running the type of routes that you're going to be asking Engram to do. So
Kroll does have practice.
Yeah, Kroll does have a specific value on this team, even though if you're making the active roster for week 1, Kroll probably does not get a jersey, just in terms of what your game day roster needs are. Or maybe not, I shouldn't say that because Nate Atkins is probably still recovering. So when Nate Atkins comes back, your 3 tight ends are probably Atkins, Troutman, Engram, and then Kroll doesn't get a jersey. But if something happens to Engram, all of a sudden Kroll becomes very important.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think it was the practices, but I also believe in the game when he set that ball down, knowing that they needed to clock it. That's it. Yeah. Those are the type of things. We already know he's big and fast and physical. We don't need any more of that. We need the mental part to be good. Well,
considering in the playoff game, he
didn't know where to line up.
He didn't know where to line up, and that's something that has been an issue for Kroll in his years here, that sometimes not quite knowing where to go, not quite knowing what to do. Showing significant growth on the mental side of it was something I think the Broncos wanted to see, and he's demonstrated that.
Yep, he has certainly demonstrated that. It is Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason going through cutdown. Still got plenty more to say, but Mace, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsor. I'll play the correct video this time.
Today's episode of Orange and Blue Today is presented by Ramos Law, the official injury law firm partner of the Denver Broncos. Ramos Law was founded by Dr. Joseph Ramos, an attorney and ER doctor, to provide exceptional care to those injured in accidents. With a unique understanding of both medicine and law, the Ramos Law team is built to fight for you every step of the way. Experience the Ramos Law difference. Contact them today at ramoslaw.com.
Okay, going through this roster and the roster cut down. Fans in the chat room are talking about Courtney Jackson earlier. Like they had to make their decision at those wide receivers, and that means Jawan Newton, Joaquin Davis, which we already knew about, and then of course Courtney Jackson, perhaps a bit of surprise to some.
Yeah, Joaquin Davis will be interesting because, like I mentioned this on another show last night. In the previous 2 years since Sean Payton became coach, none of the players that the Broncos officially waived on the Monday, the day before the final cut, none of the players the Broncos officially waived on the Monday end up on the practice squad 2 days later. So that would include Joaquin Davis. There's a first time for everything, as I say, but that trend would seem to work against him if that holds. So just bear that in mind. But Courtney Jackson, I think the Broncos would certainly, they'd certainly potentially like him back on returns. So we'll see. I mean, he effectively would be your backup punt returner, at least, for Marvin Mims Jr. Tyler Bidet looks like he's going to be your other kickoff returner next to Marvin Mims Jr. They wanted a running back for that role. It looks like that's going to be Bidet handling that second person out there. But then your backup punt returner, I think, wouldn't surprise me if it's Courtney Jackson in the end. But that didn't mean they thought it was worth a roster spot for that guy. I think it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the wide receiver room on the practice squad shakes out. My guess is you'll see 3 wide receivers on the practice squad.
Okay.
I'd say, and obviously, if any of them get claimed, that may have something to do with it. If A.T. Perry doesn't get claimed, and I don't expect he will because he had the injury, I would expect A.T. Perry will be one of them.
Easy sell to get him back to. He's Sean's guy.
Yeah, Sean was Pete Carmichael's guy, and basically kind of Pete and Sean are kind of in lockstep on this. And I'd say probably with A.T. Perry, the trade of Devon Vele kind of creates a little bit more of a window and a path for him as well. It's kind of one guy kind of out of the way. So now if you're A.T. Perry, you're basically one injury away from playing time potentially there in that room. And so that's something that probably works in his favor. If A.T. Perry is on the practice squad, that's probably, like I said, probably that means one guy gets hurt, he's probably getting a jersey because of his experience in the system and because he's that big body target that does fit the template. So if he passes through, he's probably in a good spot to just kind of be there, kind of waiting in the wings, and you'll see where he goes.
Perry, Jackson, Newton, are those the 3 you would guess?
Well, it'll be interesting because this is where it also comes into opportunity and whether the best opportunity is here and elsewhere. And the other thing is also needs in terms of the scout team. And this is where, do you go with the guy who has upside like a Rowan or a Jerwan Newton to be your slot receiver in practice, or do you want the guy that you trust and know? And that, of course, is Michael Bandy. Michael Bandy is like your security blanket there, the guy you know, the guy you trust, the guy you had around for multiple years. So, that's where you sort of get into these tugs of war where personnel might be fighting with the coaches a little bit. You've got these multiple needs that go in because Michael Bandy's one of those guys that coaches really trust and they like. So we'll see. But you do know who and what Michael Bandy is, but you don't know who and what Rowan and Newton are at this point. So that's something. But again, these are the sorts of things that come into play. But I would say probably 3 receivers. I'm curious to see if they add a running back or not, because of course you have Blake Watson, who he got the injury settlement. I wouldn't be surprised to see Blake Watson back in a few weeks
Right.
on the team. And if that's the case, maybe you don't see a running back on the practice squad, perhaps. Like that may be a position where they just ride with the 4 they've got for now. You'll see probably, I would expect you'll see a couple of offensive linemen at least that they let go of. And then I'm sure you'll probably have a couple of cornerbacks. I'm sure you'll see a safety. Probably, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Keydron Smith, who went practice squad 53 last year, if he passes through, I think Keydron Smith's the guy that you would see back in some capacity. And I think Adam Prentice, it would be logical for the Broncos to bring him back. With Michael Burton out for the season after having hamstring surgery, presumably Adam Prentice, you could do the same thing with him that you did with Michael Burton last year. Because he's a vested veteran, you could do practice squad, 3 elevations, and then move him up to the 53 afterwards. So if you wanted to do that with Prentice, you could do the same thing with him, or you could see what else is out there. But Prentice, certainly, he's worked with Sean Payton before back in 2021. And, of course, staying with the Saints means he's got 3 years of experience in this scheme, so he does know what he's doing. The other thing is you could just say Prentice for 3 weeks or Prentice for a couple of weeks until Nate Adkins gets fully healthy, and then Adkins could be effectively your fullback as well. And that's the other thing. If Adkins kind of becomes more your fullback, does that mean that Lucas Kroll kind of ends up playing a little bit more because he becomes more your tight end? All these things come into play as well as you're constructing this whole thing.
Yeah, and these decisions, as you point out, Mace, one, there's not everybody agrees on every decision within the building.
Yes.
And then not every decision is based off of just your performance. And that's that's the business of this game.
Development matters, upside matters. All these things kind of come into play. Like, what's your ceiling here? But also, like, what is your function in practice as well? And that's where someone like Bandy has value because of what he does specifically in practice. But this is where the tug of war comes in of saying, okay, is there a guy who can do what Bandy does that has upside? But then the coaches may say, well, we want this specific player because of something specific that we need in practice. And so you have these competing interests sometimes. And in the end, some get what they want and then some get what they want. You end up having, there are compromises that get made in terms of constructing this here. Not everybody gets all of what they want when they're putting this thing together.
Right. Yeah, Phil showed a story from his Colts time where they called him in early because there was disagreement among the staff, and they didn't want him seen in the hallways where somebody could grab him and be like, I actually disagree with coach. It was Frank Reich, I believe. Yeah,
I mean, it gets incredibly complex. And the thing is, they don't want the player to know that because, that's the whole thing of wanting to have a united front.
We're in lockstep.
Like that. Oh, that's a big thing. But I wasn't responsible. I felt differently and all that. These are the sorts of dynamics that come into play. Like it can get really messy if you're not careful about this stuff. So that's why the next 19, 20 hours actually internally get pretty wild here as they're putting this thing together. And then the other thing that's going on, and this is a thing to watch for, is there are always about 25 to 32 players around the league that get claimed off waivers. And the stat that I've thrown out there is draft picks in the last 3 years. About 16% of that year's draft picks who hit the waiver wire are claimed, compared to 4% of all the other players. So that's interesting when you talk about Caleb Lohner hitting the wire, for example. Right. But The Broncos, they have waiver claim priority number 20. Of course, if you want to know the claim priority, just consult the draft order. Tennessee is number 1. So the Broncos see somebody they like, and Jordan Dizon, this is, he's the pro scout. He'll have that. What Sean Payton said is they've got people, and each of them's got part of the league, and they're going through the waiver wire, and they're going through guys, and then they'll consider that. And so for some players like that are on the 53, there's not security here over the next 16, 17 hours or so, because the Broncos might find somebody they like better. Although I will say, if you're Frank Crumb and you heard what Sean Payton said about 3 teams inquiring about you in trade and the Broncos turned them all down, I would say Frank Crumb probably feels pretty good about his spot, even though he's offensive lineman number 9, probably in terms of where he fits depth-wise. The fact that the Broncos turned 3 teams down in terms of trade inquiries probably means he can sleep soundly tonight, knowing that he's not going to be the one who would get removed from the roster for a waiver claim here. But yes, some of the other guys it might still be a little bit of a sleepless night tonight for those who are very much on the edge right now, because as you know, Jordan Dizon, coming from Philadelphia the last few years, Howie Roseman likes to work that waiver wire in the day after the cuts. So,
oh yeah,
wouldn't it all be a surprise if the Broncos did make a claim?
I got an idea of a claim I'll get to in just a little bit, but help me remember, because it was the Stanford quarterback who replaced Paxton Lynch. Paxton Lynch made the
Kevin
team.
Hogan.
Kevin Hogan, thank you. And so Lynch makes the team.
Yes.
And then the next day, they get Kevin Hogan.
I'll never forget, I was at the South Pearl Farmers Market in Denver. Okay. I was walking around when I got the word that they'd claimed Hogan and Paxton was out. That was wild. Absolutely wild. Like, whoa.
Yep. You're not really safe if you're an end of the roster guy.
It was bonkers that's how it went down for Paxton.
Yeah.
That a day after cut waiver claim is how he got ziggied.
And think about how odd his career is anyway. Most first-round quarterbacks get a chance. He was never given the chance. Now, he didn't earn the chance. Although I've always said, let your first-rounder play, because if he's not the guy, you can clean house. You can get rid of him quickly.
Well, the chance that he got, it went away when he hurt his ankle in Oakland, and that was it.
Wow, was that still Oakland back then? Yeah.
Yes.
You're right. Yep.
Well, it was the Talib Crabtree chain game, remember?
Yes, I do.
And Talib got thrown out, and then Brendan Langley had to play. and the Raiders went right at Langley, remember?
Where's he at?
Yeah. And basically that, for everything that happened, that was probably what lost the Broncos the game, was the Raiders picking on Langley in the course of that. So
yeah.
What a season that was. What a mess.
We'll see if they make any moves. Our guy Gage says Damian Martinez. That's not the guy I had, because the 49ers released Jeff Wilson. And Wilson in 5 years, and he did go to the Dolphins too. Mm-hmm. And I asked Phil about it today, and he's like, well, he's a wide zone guy. And I was like, yeah, he'd fit right in. And he's got speed. And he had 1,700 yards in 5 years with the 49ers. I like that. I like that experience. I like that production. Came in undrafted, 2018. So he's been around a while, but he's got speed, and he knows that system very well, whether it was in Miami or with the 49ers.
So who's your guy? Luke Lachey?
Luke Lachey and Jeff Wilson. Yeah, okay. I'm saying Luke Lachey, you go get him, and you make it right? What's the beginning of Force Awakens? This will begin to make things right.
Of course, of that, all the stuff we said about Lucas Kroll, you might be that. Unfortunately, would that be the guy you let go because you go tight end for tight end there? Maybe. Yep. In that case, but
they're so packed. It's not going to be one of the defensive linemen, as you mentioned. Those guys earned that spot. Kroll did too, but if
Kroll
you're going to
did.
pick up another tight end, it might be because of that.
It's rough. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, this is the unfortunate part of the zero-sum game that is the NFL. I mean, Damian Martinez would be interesting. Are you losing one of your running backs to let go? I mean, is it Bidet or Jaleel McLaughlin?
Are you bothered because Martinez is a power guy? Are you bothered there's no power guy, really? I mean, Dobbins has some power for sure.
Yeah.
And Harvey has some power. It's mainly his low center of gravity. So I'm not saying they lack any sort of power. It's not just a bunch of scat backs, but is that any concern for you in this roster construction? There's not a Mark Ingram, here's our hammer guy. It's 3rd and 1. We need to get it, and let's bring in the big guy. Like, they don't really have that.
I mean, you hope that RJ Harvey can at least burrow in that situation because he's compact and he's got the strong leg drive. So I'd like to think you can get that tough yard with him. So I'm okay with that. And I think Tyler Bidet is built to get that tough yard as well. So it may not be just slamming Estime in like you would have hoped, but I think you can hopefully get that when you need it from what you have.
Okay.
But I mean, Damian Martinez, he's what, 6'2", 217. I mean, he does have that attribute, but
he's got some striking power to him, that's for sure.
Was he the only drafted running back who got cut today?
And someone in the chat asked me about tight ends. I haven't yet done a full scouring of the league.
And we have not seen the full list. Like that's the thing. The full list hasn't gotten out yet. Like I just went on the NFL went on the NFL transaction list, and it has not gotten out on the NFL communication site yet, the full transaction list. So we see all the reports and all that, but there are some but they have not put the full thing on one page yet. We're still kind of piecing this thing together here. So
yeah, and we'll have a better idea once the dust kind of settles around the league and
Frank
the information.
He's a smaller back. He's 5'8", 194, but Frank Gore Jr. got released today.
Auntie Chill.
Yeah.
That's what I always remember Frank Gore Jr. for. And I still wanted to see Frank Gore Sr. still playing with Frank Gore Jr.
Well, it was actually wild that, and it just tells you how long Frank Gore Sr. lasted, that here he was with Buffalo this summer, and his father was just with the Bills 6 years ago. I mean, it wasn't that long, right?
No, not at all.
That's when I saw him sign with Buffalo, I'm like, gosh, it just seemed like a few minutes ago that Frank Gore Sr. was up there, and I'm like, yep, 2019. It was the first playoff year with Josh Allen that Frank Gore Sr. was running for Buffalo. I mean, it's why I was rooting for Frank Gore Jr. to make the Bills, so you could say that Junior and Senior both took handoffs in the regular season from Josh Allen. When did that ever happen, right? But no, we were denied that little bit of NFL oddity.
Just super quick. Also, Khalil Herbert got released. I wanted the Broncos to pick him up last year. The Colts let him go today. So that's a veteran Vatek back that can be a runner and a receiver out of the backfield. So, some interesting names.
Well, he's correct me if I'm wrong. He's vested. So he wouldn't be waiver wire. He would be he'd be released. So he'd be an interesting, if nobody wanted him, he'd be an interesting practice squad fit.
He can do everything.
I would, if you could kind of convince him practice squad and kind of let's see, let's bring you in, let's see what's there. I wouldn't mind that. Khalil Herbert on the practice squad. Just kind of maybe give him a little bit of a sweeten, kind of sweeten the practice squad pot a bit, which you can do, and bring him in. That's something that would be, I think, maybe a little bit of a wise move there if the Broncos want to look into that.
Yep.
No, more experience in that room.
Yep. Mase, before we're out of here, any final thoughts on this cut down day?
All right. Just gonna go through it here. I think we pretty much touched on everything. I'm glad we got to discuss Frank Crumb for a while, because when all that came down, like I said to myself, I want to make a point of it. It's funny. Sean Payton he made a point of saying, like, he didn't really want to talk specifically about cuts. So I kind of said, okay, well, I'm going to ask about players who kind of stuck and why. And I really wanted to ask him about Frank Crumb. I was not expecting he was going to drop the nugget about 3 teams inquiring on him. I thought that, again, that's when I look back on the things he said today, that's the thing that, like, I was like, that probably has some, like I said earlier, some significant kind of long-term ramifications in terms of how much they value him, because they were more than, as we saw with Vele, they were more than willing to make deals when they were there, and more than willing to trade a player in whom they had value. That they did not trade Crumb says something. It's one of those things. It's not everything, but it's something.
Very much so. Very much so. You guys in our audience, with over 2,000 people watching right now live on Orange and Blue today, you are everything for us, and we appreciate you very much. Mase, how can folks help us out here on our YouTube channel?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell,
so that you never miss vid. That's right. He is Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mase Denver. I am at Cecil Lammy saying OBT's BFD. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please, as always, you gotta stay frosty, baby.